All right, hey everyone, welcome back. Feels like the news today is kind of like one of those giant Jenga games, you know? You pull one piece out and the whole thing teeters.
I see what you mean.
So today we're diving deep. You ready for this? Market summaries, financial reports, even some car stuff, just to show you how things that seem totally random are actually all connected to, well, rising global uncertainty.
Yeah.
It's going to be a wild ride, so buckle up.
It's definitely a lot to take in. But yeah, seeing how it all connects is definitely key right now.
For sure. All right, so let's kick things off with some political drama. South Korea, we've got martial law, impeachment attempts, accusations of treason. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot. So President Yoon declaring martial law, Parliament quickly overturned it, of course, but that was after the opposition party accused him of treason. They were also the ones, by the way, pushing for impeachment.
Wow.
And this kind of instability, politically speaking, it's never good for a country's economy.
And, the markets definitely reacted. What did you see happening?
Oh yeah, big time. The South Korean won. Dropped against the dollar, the KOSPI index tumbled. Even the U.S. traded South Korean ETF
Right.
took a hit. It's like a textbook example of how political turmoil can directly freak out investors.
Yeah, totally. It just goes to show you, right, how connected everything is globally. One country's political mess, and the whole world feels it.
Exactly. And to try and, calm things down, South Korean authorities promised unlimited liquidity to the markets.
Wait, hold on, back up. Unlimited liquidity. That sounds like, I don't know, something out of a movie. What does that even mean, like in real life?
Okay, so think of it like this. It's a central bank basically saying, chill out, everyone. We got this. They're basically saying they'll throw in as much cash as it takes to, like, prevent a total meltdown, restore confidence,
So it's kind of like a safety net. Like, hey, don't worry, we'll catch you.
exactly. But here's the thing. So South Korea is dealing with all this political and economic craziness, right?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the global markets, they seem to be, like, totally chill. The S&P 500 even hit another record high.
So are investors just like ignoring the potential risk? I mean, it seems weird that everything's so calm with all this uncertainty, doesn't it?
It is a bit of a head-scratcher.
Yeah.
While the S&P 500 is climbing, the VIX, that's the fear index, it stayed pretty stable.
Hmm.
Could be investors are just super optimistic. Or maybe they see something we don't.
Could this be like history repeating itself? I mean, haven't we seen this before, like right before a big market crash? It makes you wonder if people are just being a little too complacent.
That's a good point. It's like, remember the dot-com bubble.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it makes you think, right? Are people ignoring the warning signs, or do they know something we don't? Definitely something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. It feels like there's always like this undercurrent.
Yeah.
Something we need to keep an eye on. Okay, but speaking of market trends, the Magnificent Seven stocks, they're still going strong, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Amazon, Apple, Nvidia, and Meta, they've all had like crazy winning streaks.
Right.
But there's one outlier. In the Magnificent Seven, I mean, Tesla. One of their biggest individual shareholders, Leo Kogwan, he actually sold off some of his stock.
Really? So why is he doing that? Is he like jumping ship because he thinks Tesla's going to tank?
Well, yeah, he's worried about a sell-off in the future. So even with all this market optimism, some people are starting to hedge their bets.
That's interesting. It's like this weird balance between, positive market stuff and this underlying worry.
Exactly. And looking ahead, there are a couple big events that could really shake things up globally. The OPEC Plus meeting and China's Central Economic Work Conference.
Okay, let's break those down. First, OPEC plus Medable. What's the deal with that?
Well, it looks like they're leaning towards delaying their oil production revival.
All
This
right.
is after, the U.S. put sanctions on Iran's shadow fleet, which already pushed oil prices up. Delaying that revival could push them even higher.
Ugh, so gas prices could go up even more. Not exactly what people want to hear right now, especially with all the other economic stuff going on.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, switching gears to China, their Central Economic Work Conference is where, like, their top leaders get together and decide on their economic plan for the year.
So they're setting economic targets and like figuring out stimulus plans. Seems like a pretty big deal for understanding where China's economy is headed.
Huge. Their decisions will have a ripple effect, globally.
Hmm.
And actually, speaking of forecasts, HSBC strategists are predicting some potential trouble for 2025.
Uh-oh.
They say there's a risk of inflation driven by tariffs and geopolitics. And get this, they even think the AI trade might fizzle out.
Wait, fizzle out? What does that even mean?
So it's like the whole AI hype might not actually lead to the market gains people are expecting, kind of like the dot-com bubble, you know. all that excitement didn't last.
Right, so it's like a cautionary tale reminding us that not every hot new thing is going to be a long-term success.
Exactly. And when you look at the latest economic data, it's kind of a mixed bag. The U.S. is looking good with job openings and vehicle sales, but China's services PMI data wasn't as strong as people thought it would be.
So it's like this global economic tug of war.
Yeah, kinda. And on top of that, the European Central Bank, they're thinking about a moderate interest rate reduction in their next meeting. And the Federal Reserve is about to release its Beige Book, which will give us more info on the U.S. economy.
Okay, so we've got political drama in South Korea, a mixed bag of economic stuff, and some big economic events coming up. What else is catching your eye in the news?
Well, if we zoom in on some company performances, Salesforce and Marvell Technology are doing really well. Both of them had awesome earnings reports. They're optimistic about the future, and their stocks shot up in after-hours trading.
That's great. What's behind their success? Anything our listeners can learn from?
Salesforce, their strength is being platform agnostic when it comes to cloud computing. Their tools work no matter what tech you're already using. It's a smart move because once a company goes with Salesforce, they're basically stuck in their ecosystem.
Makes sense. So they're reaching a wider audience and like making themselves super valuable at the same time. Strategic.
Totally. And then there's Marvell Technology. They're like dominating the data center tech market. And with, the whole rise of AI and the demand for cloud services and data infrastructure, they're in a prime position.
So they're riding the wave of all these digital trends. Smart. But not every company's doing so hot, right? Tesla's Shanghai factory deliveries have gone down for the second month in a row, and Intel is still trying to find a new CEO.
Yeah, true. It's not all good news out there. The Tesla thing in China, that's interesting, especially considering Amazon just announced record Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales. It's crazy how different things are going for those two companies.
It's like two totally opposite stories, right? One company is crushing it with shoppers while the other is struggling in a key market.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just those two. While Amazon's celebrating record sales, Tesla's largest shareholder is pulling out. And then there's Palantir Technologies. They just got U.S. government authorization for 2 of their cloud services, so their stock is going up.
So there's a lot happening in tech. Some companies are handling the uncertainty better than others.
Definitely. Oh, and there's more. Meta seems to be changing how they moderate content. AT&T is predicting good profit growth, and they're authorizing a share buyback, and BlackRock is buying HPS Investment Partners. Things are changing fast in the corporate world.
It's a lot to keep up with. Okay, but before we get into all that, let's switch gears to something else that's been heating up. The tension between the U.S. and China. The trade war seems to be escalating, and China banning the export of those dual-use minerals feels like a big move.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant move. This ban on things like gallium and germanium, which are crucial for making semiconductors and for military stuff, it's basically China showing off their power. They're taking advantage of their control over the global tech supply chain to put pressure on the U.S.
So how much does the U.S. rely on China for these minerals? What could happen because of this ban?
The U.S. is really dependent on China for these specific minerals,
Yeah.
and this ban could mess up the whole semiconductor supply chain. That's bad news, not just for the tech industry, but also for, national security stuff like defense systems. It's like a wake-up call that maybe we shouldn't rely on just one source for these things.
Wow, this feels like a turning point in the whole U.S.-China rivalry. What's the message here? What's China trying to say?
They're basically saying they're not afraid to use their economic power to get what they want politically. They're showing that they have the upper hand in this whole global game of tech and economic dominance.
It feels like this could really change the whole global tech landscape.
Absolutely. It shows how interconnected the global supply chain is and how easily things can fall apart when countries aren't getting along. It's a reminder that things are unpredictable out there, and it's getting more and more complex.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just the U.S. and China that are going through tough times, right? Things are chaotic in France with President Macron facing a no-confidence vote, and that ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon is still really fragile. Feels like the whole world is kind of on edge.
It does, doesn't it? There are so many potential problems around the world, and because everything's so interconnected, what happens in one place can easily affect everyone.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. The political drama in South Korea, that potential fizzling AI trade, the U.S.-China trade war, and even this record Black Friday sales. It's a lot of information, but hopefully you're starting to see how all these seemingly random things are actually part of a bigger trend, this rising global uncertainty.
Yeah, and it's important to see these connections and understand these trends so we can make sense of what's happening in the world and figure out how to deal with the challenges and opportunities that come our way.
Very true. Before we wrap up part one of this deep dive, are there any other big themes or trends we should be paying attention to?
You know, one thing that really stands out to me is this whole idea of resilience.
Resilience.
Yeah, we're seeing it everywhere. Financial markets, companies, even geopolitics. It's like being able to adapt and handle all this uncertainty and bounce back from setbacks. That's what sets people apart now.
It's like the people who can roll with the punches, they're the ones who'll come out on top. And speaking of rolling with punches, China banning those dual-use minerals, that was a real curveball for the tech world. Feels like a pretty calculated move, leaving a lot of people scrambling.
Oh yeah, no doubt. That was a major escalation in the U.S.-China trade war. By restricting those materials, gallium and germanium, they're used in pretty much everything tech, from phones to, like, fighter jets. China's showing they're not messing around. They're willing to use their economic power to flex their muscles on the world stage.
So what does this mean for the U.S.? How badly do we need those materials from China? And what about national security? Is this a big risk?
The U.S. relies on China a lot for those minerals.
Yes.
And this ban could really mess things up for the whole semiconductor industry, not just tech companies, but also things like defense systems. It's a bit of a wake-up call, like maybe we shouldn't put all our eggs in one basket.
Yeah, makes you think. It's like, are we headed towards this future where the U.S. and China are totally separate in the tech world? Each one with their own supply chains, not depending on the other. Almost like a tech arms race or something.
It's definitely a possibility. This whole thing could push the U.S. to look for materials elsewhere, start making more stuff domestically, maybe even find completely new materials to use.
Right.
But those solutions take time, right? And money.
Mm.
So the short-term impact could be pretty rough.
So are we looking at a world where tech is divided? The U.S. over here, China over there. What does that even mean for, like, innovation and for the global economy? Is it gonna be stable?
Those are the big questions for sure. If
Yeah.
we go down that road, you might see a lot of duplicated effort, innovation might slow down, and even the internet could become more fragmented. Nobody really wins in that situation. But if tensions keep rising, it might be unavoidable.
That's kind of scary to think about. Okay, let's change gears a bit. We've talked about some companies struggling, but what about those that are actually doing well in all this? Salesforce and Marvell Technology, they seem to be killing it.
Oh yeah, there are great examples of companies that are not just adapting to change, but actually using it to their advantage. Salesforce, their cloud platform, works across all kinds of systems, which is super useful for businesses. They've made themselves essential. And Marvell Technology, they're right in the sweet spot for this whole data center boom.
So what's the takeaway here? What can our listeners learn from these companies, whether they're, individual investors or running their own businesses?
Being adaptable is key, and really understanding your customers. Salesforce saw that businesses needed flexibility and integration, and they built their platform around that. And Marvell, they saw the data explosion coming and got ahead of it.
So it's about thinking ahead, seeing the trends, and offering real solutions to real problems.
Exactly. That's what works in today's world.
For sure. Okay, and then there's Amazon. Record sales on Black Friday and Cyber Monday shows that online shopping is still huge and people are still spending. But on the other hand, Tesla's having trouble in China and Intel still can't find a CEO. It's like even the big guys aren't immune to problems.
It's true. No one's guaranteed success. Supply chains can get messed up. People's tastes change. Leadership changes. It can all throw a company off course.
So what's the difference between the companies that thrive and the ones that struggle? Is it just luck or is there something else going on?
It's rarely just luck. The companies that can move quickly, have strong leaders, and change their strategies when they need to, those are the ones that usually survive the tough times.
So being proactive, not reactive, and knowing when to pivot.
Yep. And it also helps to have a clear vision, a strong company culture, and really understand your market.
And while we're talking about strategic moves, BlackRock buying HPS Investment Partners is a pretty big deal for asset management. Why are we seeing this kind of consolidation? What does it tell us about the future?
BlackRock's making a play for alternative investments, stuff like private credit. With interest rates so low, those are looking pretty good right now.
So they're trying to grab a bigger piece of that growing market.
Exactly. And I think we'll see more of this kind of consolidation as companies try to expand and offer more services.
It feels like the world just keeps changing, and companies and investors need to be on their toes to keep up.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to stay informed, think critically, and be ready to adapt. Things are changing fast.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming sometimes with so much information coming at you from every direction. What advice would you give our listeners who are trying to make sense of it all?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Look at things from different angles and challenge what you think you know. Develop your critical thinking skills, stay curious, and be open to changing your mind when you learn new things.
That's great advice. It's not just about taking in information, it's about really engaging with it, questioning things, looking for different perspectives.
Exactly. Be a smart consumer of information. Don't just believe everything you hear.
It's like being a detective, right? You got to look at all the evidence, see if anything doesn't add up, and figure out the whole story.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And just like a detective, you got to keep asking questions, digging deeper, and looking at things from different sides to really understand what's going on.
That's what we've tried to do in this deep dive. We've explored all these different things happening around the world, connected the dots between them, and hopefully given you the knowledge and insights to navigate this crazy world.
We've talked about a lot, from the U.S.-China trade war to the possibility of the AI trade fizzling out, from political chaos to record-breaking sales. It's a lot to take in, but hopefully you have a better understanding now of what's shaping our world and a renewed curiosity about what the future holds.
It's been a fascinating journey so far, and it's not over yet. So before we head into the last part of our deep dive, are there any other big themes or trends emerging that you think we should be keeping an eye on? You know, we've talked about all these economic numbers and market trends and like countries making big moves, but I keep thinking about the people in all of this, you know. This idea of resilience, it's not just for companies, it's for all of us trying to make sense of this crazy world.
It's more important than ever these days, that's for sure. Think about it. We're drowning in information. Things are changing constantly, and we have to make decisions without knowing the whole picture.
Yeah.
Being able to adapt, learn from mistakes, and bounce back. That's how you succeed in, like, everything.
So it's not just about surviving the tough times, it's about actually growing from them. How can our listeners, build that kind of resilience in their own lives?
Well, it starts with how you think about things.
Mhm.
Having a growth mindset, believing that you can learn and get better at stuff that's super important, being open to new information, questioning what you think you know, and seeing setbacks as opportunities to learn, that's all part of it.
So it's about being okay with the learning process, even when it's not easy or comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And don't underestimate emotional intelligence. Being able to understand and manage your own emotions, and also, like, understand where other people are coming from. That's crucial for dealing with tough situations and building good relationships, which are super important for resilience too.
It's like having a strong support system, right? People you can lean on.
100%. Having people you trust who can give you different perspectives and be there for you when things get tough, that's priceless. And don't forget about having a sense of purpose, knowing what's important to you, what your values are, and what kind of impact you want to make on the world. That can really keep you grounded when everything else feels chaotic.
So resilience isn't just about being tough. It's about being flexible, understanding people, and being connected to something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about developing all these different skills and ways of thinking that help you deal with, all the curveballs life throws at you.
And speaking of curveballs, we've talked a lot about making smart decisions, right? Whether it's investing, your career, or just understanding the news. Being able to look at information critically is so important.
There's just so much information out there these days, it's easy to get lost. But it's important to remember that not all information is equal. Being able to think critically, separate facts from fiction, spot biases, make good judgments, those are essential skills.
So it's not just about reading or listening to stuff. It's about really thinking about it, questioning it, and trying to see things from different angles.
Exactly. Be an active participant, not just a passive consumer.
It's almost like being a detective, right? You got to look for clues, find the inconsistencies, and put the pieces together.
That's a great way to think about it. And just like a detective, you need to keep asking questions, digging deeper, and looking at things from different perspectives to really understand what's going on.
And that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive, right? Explore all these different things happening globally, see how they're connected, and give you the tools to make sense of it all.
We've covered a lot of ground. The U.S.-China trade war, that potential AI trade fizzle, political shakeups, those record-breaking Black Friday sales. It's a lot to process, but Hopefully you're walking away with a better understanding of how the world works and, a sense of curiosity about what's next.
It's been an amazing journey, and it's definitely not over. As we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with this thought. We've talked about the US and China, how they're vying for power, and how tech could become this divided thing. But the big question is, what happens next? How will this rivalry shape innovation, the global economy, who has power on the world stage? It's a question that's going to keep unfolding, and we'll definitely be digging into it in future deep dives. So until then, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.